Hello, I'm David Grossman. Welcome to Keeping It Real. Great to be here. We are broadcasting on All Talk TV from Fitzgerald's Pub on Queen Street in the Beaches. So delighted to be here, and also welcome Joe White, the franchise rainmaker. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it on a cold morning like today. I'll tell you, this is one good reason to move south. It was like minus 17 or something like that.
Yeah, my wife just got back from Florida, so a couple weeks down there, and she really felt the cold when she got back.
Yeah, it's a cold one out there, but hopefully we're gonna have a break soon. I feel it coming. It's got to be soon. Within the next few weeks, spring is gonna break, right?
I sure hope so.
Usually comes in March, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So lots of great things to talk about. Joe, as people are thawing out soon enough from the winter and want to get their careers back on track, want to get their business on track, whatever it is. We want to talk about a few things today. In particular, we want to talk about young people and franchising.
Absolutely, yeah.
We want to talk about people who are maybe in jobs and they're thinking, where am I headed? What's going on in my future?
Right.
And some of the benefits of owning a business versus working for somebody else. I have my thoughts on that, but
yeah. It's all a good plan. Great topics.
So let's start off with the notion of young people and franchising. What's happening out there today? I mean, I see young people, seems like they're looking for jobs and they can't find them. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, they're finding jobs too, but they're not the kind of jobs that they expected. You know, I mean, as a parent, you know, and we go through these things where we have expectations for our children and their success and where they're going, and we spend a lot of money educating them, right? I mean,
oh yes, we do.
And what happens is they end up with. They end up in jobs that aren't really reflecting all the knowledge or the expertise that you have. I mean, you'll see MBAs driving taxis or things of that nature. And so there's a little bit of a tragedy going on there for families and for mom and dad in those environments as they try to figure out what they can do for their children. And the other thing too that happens, interestingly enough, David, is on the corporate side, there's a reflection that you gotta earn your spurs before you're making money. So we're seeing some of that certainly going on.
Right. So you could be an MBA, but you have to start getting coffee, like Alberto was getting coffee this morning for us. Even though he's got the skills, probably could run his own TV studio now.
Yep. And how does he get a chance to do that? When does he get a chance? And who's in the way, or who's stopping him from achieving that desire? And so we see it. I mean, you go to the restaurants and you'll see, you know, the well-educated people serving, and there's nothing wrong with being of service, nothing wrong with that at all. But the expectations are higher for people than that, and so that's the challenge that you're seeing out there. And it can be a bit tragic because corporate America just doesn't allow them to, in most cases, rise up.
Right. So what options are available for people in that situation?
Well, you know, there's a number of options that are available. I mean, they can stay doing what they are and let the career take its path. You know, there's a wonderful story that I can share with you, if I may. It's about a gentleman, I'd love to tell you his name, but I can't. But he was a man I worked with in the United States particularly, and he had been a key player in a very large insurance company in the United States, key role. And in corporate environment, he himself had made a lot of money, been very, very successful in doing that. And then he came to, and then he had two children. He had two daughters. And I met him, and he said to me after his great success, and he'd left corporate environment, he was running a fund business himself and doing that. And he said to me, Joe, under no circumstances are my children going to work for somebody. He said, not unless, and he did put a caveat to it, not unless they're in the business of learning about being in a business for themselves.
Okay.
And so you know, and so what he decided, he said, what we have to do is we have to find them an opportunity. We have to find them something that they can grow equity and value. Now, and he was prepared to put some pretty significant dollars into that to help them do that. And you know, but you don't have to have significant dollars to do that. But in his case, it was. But I really was quite captivated by the comment that it was about corporate America, because he said it's just basically broke. And the opportunities there. So you end up with the trap of what are people going to do? What direction can you take your family?
Right.
And so, you know, you look at business as an alternative. And there's some traps with that as well. There's some concerns that parents and things would have.
Right. Like, for example.
Well, let me say this about the good intention of parents often.
Yes.
We all want well for our children. That's just the nature. But the child has to have a burn too. Like business owners.
Child has to have a what?
Have a burn for being in a
Right.
business.
Sure.
You know, they have to have that desire.
They can't just because they don't want to go to work every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or my mom and dad will look after me. Or
Right.
they have to have that drive. But if you have that drive and you know you've got it in your children, then you can foster it and grow it. And there's the idea too that comes up with that often they think, oh, well, this would be my life business, so I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Bad idea too, because it's only their first business. Because business, I don't know, you, maybe David, maybe you own one or more businesses along the way, or many people in their career will do that. So start and think of the education you get. I mean, you can send them to school, get your MBA, and what's that going to cost?
Right. Well, so what does it cost? Like, what's the range of pricing to buy a franchise or to help your kids get into a franchise?
Hey, you know, real good question, because you know you got to be very careful as well in what you're doing in terms of looking. I mean, you can get into some lower end opportunities, but they may not be good quality businesses for yourself. You know, you might find something that $20,000 or $30,000 as an entry fee, right? Basically as a franchise fee. However, you got to remember too, you got to sustain yourself, work through your startup and things like that. So you've got to be very careful about that. But you should be planning for anywhere from 50 to 100,000. And you know, the interesting thing about a young person starting a business is their financial commitments are not as high. They don't have the mortgage yet.
Right.
And or whatever. And you know, they got to go back to school. So if you think about it, I mean, you could spend that kind of money, but they're going to start getting into cash flow positive situations because of the effort and the energy that are there for them to put into it, to make it grow. So that's all positive, but we got to really watch that situation. That really, I can't emphasize enough, that passion has to be there. That may come later. And the other thing that you'll see parents that want to help their children do that, but they're just, you know, they could end up wasting their money. So that's why they need to get proper advice or counseling on that stuff.
So, Joe, let's talk about people who are in jobs and who are thinking down the road, you know, is this job going anywhere? I can't seem to get ahead.
Yeah.
What do I do? Do I just ride it out? Do I
easy,
just
Hank.
bail out? I mean, what to do?
Yeah.
What are the options?
Excuse me. Well, there are many choices, and all of those are available, right? You can, let's sort of break those down a little bit. I mean, I can stay doing what I'm doing, and I might be okay. But if you have that anxiety and that fear, you can leave totally. You can literally walk away from employment and start your own thing in your own franchise or in your own business and make that happen for yourself. But most people won't do that. I mean, it's a lot easier to play in the playground of what you've got, than to go and find a new playground.
Especially if you haven't been kicked out yet.
Yeah, and you know what traps many people on? You know what they're waiting for? It's really fascinating. My severance.
Right, the golden handcuffs.
Yeah, you know, like I remember I walked away from a career where I'd been 18 years in the oil industry.
Yes.
And but I walked away because I couldn't do it anymore, and I was waiting for the severance.
Right.
And it wasn't coming, or I was too good at what I do. They liked me too much, I guess. But so I didn't do that. But now what happens is there are other alternatives that are available for people, and and it's a lot safer. So what we start seeing, David, is people are contemplating business ownership while being employed.
Good idea.
It is a good idea, and there are many alternatives, and there's challenges. Like you'll see things like examples often in the food industry where you own a place and you got a manager, so you manage the manager in those environments. But the food industry, I mean, I like the food industry, but it can be more time consuming and take you away more from the job than your involvement in it, depending how your family's geared to handle it. And the other option then is finding something that is just straight manage the manager, 10 to 15 hours per week, maybe more, real estate based. And what you're trying to do is build that retail empire or whatever that is in a semi-absent opportunity.
Right.
Now think what happens, David. Now you decide your exit strategy, right? 3, 4 years down the road.
Right.
And you're making X, and you probably have more than replaced your salary.
Yes. Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to.
And it's safe.
Right.
And it's fascinating. So the real challenge you've got there is about picking the right brand, picking the right opportunity, and one that. And you know what's interesting about them is they tend to be not necessarily the most exciting style businesses. I mean, you won't wake up and go jump out of bed every day that this is what I'm going to be doing. But what you are doing is securing your future down the road. You know, it's fascinating. Just sort of linking back, there was a gentleman that had triplets, 13 years old. What do you think the biggest fear in his life was?
Well,
Education.
they'd all find boyfriends at the same time?
Yeah, that would be, it may well be. That would probably happen. But he was looking at a situation that, in his world, that he was going to have 3 children going to college or university at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, he had a good job, but he didn't have enough, not making enough money to send 3 kids to school at the same time.
Yeah.
So he's investing in teaching golf and sports and music, and hopefully one of them will get scholarships. And we put together a strategy for him that was really fascinating. I think you'll like this. Whereby what we did is took the semi-absent business opportunity and started to get our first business. He was working. He assigned that business to the first child of a name. And then second year, he opened his second facility, and he assigned that to another one of the triplets. And the third year, we'll open his third business, and he'll have his third child. And what he ended up doing was funding, while being employed, his education fund. So the children were managers of those facilities, which in turn paid for their education. And in the process of that, he's planning to take out an operating fee for running the business, which his wife does, by the way.
Right.
And
that's a very innovative approach.
Well, yeah, he was just floored when we talked about it and how the strategy would work. And what happens at the end of it, after they all are all through college and all through the business is written in such a way that they vest back to him and he can retire.
Wow, very clever.
Well, it was an interesting strategy and an approach that you can. Those are some of the options, but people don't tend to think that way. You know, they tend to be so focused on just the job, right, and the challenges that happen there.
Right.
So it's fascinating.
So let's talk about the job, if you will, and how people look at jobs. What are the myths of employment versus having your own business? And I'm sure there's some myths too about having your own business too, right?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes they
actually,
say
yeah,
the grass is
we
greener
should maybe talk about both of those. That's actually very good. Yeah, the myth about the job is that you're good. I'm safe.
Right.
I'm okay. I got benefits. I'm looked after. I just need to ride this thing out till I'm 65 and I'll be all right. That's the myth.
And the reality is?
Well, the reality is that people change careers how many times? I mean, Alberto here will probably change careers 5 or 6 times in his life to something different. I don't know specifically those numbers. I'd love to share those with you, but different directions, different paths. He'll be out of work. He'll be challenged with all of those things. And as he gets a little older, the picture gets a little harder. In another one of our broadcasts, we talked about the challenges of the older worker and what they're up against.
Right.
So that's That's the myth, you know, but I mean, it's sort of like you're an ostrich and you got your head in the sand a little bit.
Right.
And of course, the myth in business ownership is there too.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's all easy. This just in, get to work. Because you think you worked hard before, working harder you're going to be working just as hard in most cases for yourself as you build value or you build something for yourself into that.
Right.
And the success rate on pure entrepreneurialism. And what I mean by that is pure entrepreneurialism is where, you know, you just start on your own. I'm going to do all the marketing. I'm going to do all the sales. I'm going to do all the accounting.
Right.
I'm going to do all the legal. I'm going to do all of the bookkeeping. I'm going to do whatever else it is, and I'm going to keep pace with technology. I'm going to hire all these resources. I got to get all these marketing materials together. It's a hard go with the speed and rate of change that things come at you. It's hard to keep up. But, you know, wealth is generated through business ownership.
Yes.
You know, 80% of the wealth held in North America is a result of business ownership.
Right.
But the sad fact in that entrepreneurialism is that 95% of entrepreneurs are making less than $50,000 a year. So that should scare you enough to think twice about staying in your job.
Right.
So what's the solution, right?
What is the solution?
Franchising.
Okay.
Because
so it reduces the risk because
Well, yeah.
you're buying into a tried and true system. Is that right?
Yeah, well, 85%, exactly, and 85% of the people that start a franchise are still in those business 5 and 6 years down the road.
Right.
But, you know,
That's a pretty amazing statistic.
Well, yeah, will you have your job in 5, 6 years?
Who knows? Who knows?
Exactly. You
Right.
don't know. And, you know, so there's just a lot of great numbers around that, you know, and in fact, here's an interesting number that came up the other day. It was from a friend of mine in Cape Cod who said, that 80%, that if you, see if I'll make sure I get this right, if you were making 100,000 before and you lost your job, your you're probably, your next job will have at least a 20% reduction in
Right.
what you'll make. So you'll make 80,000.
Yeah.
And God forbid you lose your job again, because that's going to happen to you
Right.
all over
Then you'll
again.
make even less.
Because that's, yeah, it's
When
just,
you find another job.
well,
If you find another job.
if you do.
Right.
And so those are really hard realities that go. So, but if you look at it on a map and you look at the idea of the job first and versus, you know, versus business ownership, franchise business ownership, the job will win in the first year. You're going to make more money, right?
Sure, there's no cost, right? I mean, aside
Yeah.
from the time that it takes to finally find a job, once you're in there,
Yeah, you're in. You know, you're going to.
for some period of time
Yeah.
anyway, until they restructure
Sure.
and they close your department or something like
Well,
that.
that'll happen, or maybe happen, or you may get lucky. But the other part of it, so start your business against that. The business, you know, you're going to struggle, but you've invested in yourself.
Right.
And you have an asset
Right.
in most cases. And what'll happen is that asset now, you start putting value and sales. So you still have the asset, and now you're putting sales into it, and you're creating goodwill and a lot of other good things. So give the scorecard to the job first year, give it to them, they win. Let's move to the second year. The business is worth more. The asset is more, you got more value, got something to resell. You're starting to take salary out. Oh, by the way, you probably got a raise in your job. You may have got 3%. Way to go. That'll pay the taxes.
Right.
And now we go into the third year, and now you're driving. Your business should be primed, rolling, good things going. You're not talking about 3% increases. Who knows what you're talking about?
Could
as
be.
much as you're willing.
Right,
You
20,
could be
30
doubling. You
more,
could even
yeah.
doubling your size of your business or
Right.
beyond, depending on the momentum that you build in it. Now who's winning? Oh, and by the way, what do I have to sell?
You have an asset that has equity in it, right?
Sure, exactly.
Right. And then if you decide you want to sell and it's time to move on, it's when you decide.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not.
Big difference.
Yeah, I love my boss.
Right. Exactly.
And so I don't see that, and you look at that, and it's just a message that people don't clearly get, I think.
So why don't more people do this?
Courage, fear of unknown, the doubt, that goes for himself,
Right.
the not worthy, family, not supportive. There's a litany of things that you have to go through.
Risk averse.
Oh, absolutely. And not everybody's meant to be in a franchise or in any business, but they just can't see it. But when you see what I do is I help people. I like to often think I help people sort of climb the mountain, and it really I can get them to the top, and they can look down into the valley and see the land of milk and honey if you
Yes.
want.
Right.
But it's up to them to go down and get it. It takes
Right.
and that takes courage.
Yeah.
A lot of courage, and I respect people's ability to make that decision just as much as I respect people who can't make that decision.
Well, I guess sometimes it takes having to be, laid off, or, to have that first shock or disappointment in order to say, hey, I can see where these last 10 years have gone. What's going to happen the next 10 years? Where do I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah.
And that's how it happened for me, because I worked in corporate America corporate Canada, whatever. For close to 15 years.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, if I'm going to start a new project, do I want to be working for myself, or do I want to be somewhere where they can turn to me in 2-3 years and say, thanks for coming out?
You and I share that same story. That's exactly mine. It's unfortunate that we had to be forced to it and couldn't take the decision to do it on our own, because our position today might be better. I remember saying to my wife once, I said, gee, I wish I had discovered what I was doing. Why wasn't I doing this sooner?
Right.
And she always has good answers and stuff, but she says, well, maybe you just weren't ready yet.
Right. That's what I believe. It's all about timing, and so I think I got some training being in corporate America or corporate Canada.
Yeah, you do, and it's valuable, but at some point it becomes diminishing, right? If you can't take it to the next level.
Right. Absolutely. And we talked about that. Because I know somebody very close to me right now, who's working for a blue chip company, and they're waiting for the severance, and the environment is so toxic, it's so awful that you wonder, like, is this person in the long run, is this person really gaining? It might be better to just rip off the Band-Aid and move on.
Because it comes about health too,
right? And
well-being and all of those things. And it's it's hard decision to make, but it can be made.
Yeah.
And you got to find a way to make it safe. That's why we go back to something we talked about earlier. If you can start that process earlier on.
Yes. Right.
While you're employed and recognizing you have options, you're there.
Right. To make it safe, and also one of the nice things about when you're choosing a business is you can choose a business that's you're suited for. Yes. And if passion is a driver, then that can also be, that can be a real driving force, I think, in your life.
Yeah, I love the word passion too, because passion in business has two meanings. I guess I learned this lesson from one of my candidates I worked with, and I always would talk to people about, oh, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing. It's really important to be passionate. And I'd put him into a great business, and I knew he was doing well. And he came back to me and he said, Joe, he said, you need to know, I'm not passionate about my business. Oh. And I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? He says, but what I am passionate about is the lifestyle that you enabled my family and me to have.
Right. Right. Something to be said for that.
Well, it's actually more important to people than what they recognize.
Yes. The first of the F's, family, which is something we can talk more about on our next segment. Personal discovery, the F collection.
Yeah, the priorities. Yeah.
The priorities. We'll talk.
We'll do that.
We'll talk some more
I'd love
about
to do that. That would be fun.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe. Thanks so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. You should definitely give Joe White a call, Senior Franchise Advisor. He will help you find a franchise that you are well suited for, whether you are in a job and looking to think what's going to happen next in your life, where are you going with your life, and maybe you want to start something on the side that you're either passionate about or to reduce the risk of making that move, or whether you have been laid off or are looking for that next big opportunity for you and for your family. Call Joe. Thanks again, and thanks for being with us today. I'm David Grossman. You're watching Keeping It Real.